Hello everybody, Kevin Acuff with Smokin Tobacco here at TPE 2024. Coverage brought to you by Drew Estate. I am in the JC Newman Cigars booth with Mr. Bobby Newman. Bobby, how are you doing today?
We're doing great. And Kevin, thank you and Barb for doing this, not only for our own company, but also for the industry, so we can keep telling the story and why cigars are such a wonderful, affordable luxury.
Oh, we appreciate everything that you guys do for the industry. I mean, anytime that you go to JC Newman Factory or even come visit JC Newman here at the show, I mean, it's literally, I mean, you can see where we're at here. It's a history lesson. You know, we've had a great conversation with you, you know, off camera, learning some history. We're from the Cleveland, Ohio area originally, and it was amazing to learn how much history Cleveland actually has in the cigar industry, had we never known.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, we are a land. I know that maybe immigrant's not a good name, but unless you're Native American, we all came from offshore. Everybody in the United States. And Grandpa JC he came to our country in 1888, and which is interesting. If you believe in the Bible, and if you believe in history, it repeats itself over and over again. And the reason our great grandmother came to the United States from Austria-Hungarian Empire, because she brought her 4 sons, her husband, of course, and her 2 daughters, because the Austria-Hungarian Emperor was taking all the males 13 and above into the army. The slaughter rate was 80%. And it's the same thing Putin is doing today in Russia, unfortunately. And if it hadn't been for our great-grandmother and great-grandfather, we wouldn't be standing here talking and enjoying a fine Pro de Mar cigar.
Wow, now see guys, this is a history lesson. Anytime you pick up JC Newman cigar, you know there's history there. There's history somewhere.
And it's what's so beautiful about the cigar industry that we export to 94 countries, and I've been in half the countries. There's a big trade show in Dortmund, Germany called Intertobacco. It's bigger than the PCA, but you can go anywhere, any cigar shop in America or in Europe, and many places in Asia, and you sit down, and it doesn't matter if they're white, black, Chinese, Japanese, Native American. If you're smoking a cigar with them, you have something to talk about. It's one of the great equalizers of, doesn't matter if you're sitting next to Bill Gates or you're sitting next to someone that's not Bill Gates.
Exactly. I mean, there's probably not a greater social equalizer that I can even think of. I mean, I've sat and had conversations with billionaires and, you know, guys that pick up your trash. I mean, it doesn't matter. There are no boundaries when it comes to this. We're all the same, and everybody enjoys the experience, and everybody can get together.
It is, and you know, COVID was a disaster for the world. But what COVID did bring, I can tell you, we were scared to death like everyone else. The last pandemic was 1918, and there's no one alive to us as Americans to ask what happened then. So COVID came. My son Paxton was a senior at the College of Charleston, South Carolina. So in March of 2020, all the kids in college were forced to go home, and they all started learning online. They had to take online courses, which was difficult, especially he was a biology major, which is, you can't do labs. But we didn't know what to do, so we took our factory. We try to make 65,000 cigars a day. We told half the people, go home for 1 week, we'll pay you, and then come back in the second week, and then we sent the other half. We did this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and who knew people, Kevin, that would stay home, smoke a ton of premium cigars, and drink a lot of liquor. And because all the liquor stores around the country had their best. 2020 was great. 2021 was even better. 2022 it started to slow down, and it affected so positively the premium cigar business. But more important, Kevin, it brought in, no one knows for sure, is it 100,000, is it 1 million new consumers, and it brought in a new element. Hundreds of thousands of women have now come into the industry. This is my 49th year full-time in the business. I've been working in high school, it's been over 50 years, like my brother. And I can tell you, 20 years ago, you would not see a woman and here's your wife standing 10 feet away from us on the camera, you would not see a woman within 50 yards of a man smoking a cigar, because they would see a cigar and say, "Oh, get that stinky thing away." Now we do events where sometimes there's a majority of the attendees are women, and they're buying cigars for their girlfriends, their boyfriends, their spouses. It's a great. This is the golden time of the industry. I tell you, speaking of history, you may not know, and Barb may not know this, and many of your listeners, but the industry, the premium cigar industry in America, it capped out right before World War I, because America joined. We joined in World War I. We sent over 3 million. They call them doughboys, soldiers, and they all left as cigar smokers, and the Red Cross sent care packages to these millions of men, and in those care packages were cigarettes.
Okay.
And so these men, because with cigars you don't inhale. When you smoke a cigarette, you inhale it,
right,
and you get a bigger, obviously, a nicotine fit. And so what happened is these millions of men who left as cigar smokers came back as cigarette smokers, and that was the first downturn in the industry.
That's interesting, and I had no idea that the kind of like the boom or the uptick was that long ago.
Yeah. Yes. So every generation, every decade in the industry has had so many interesting stories, and I was just telling you about what we're doing now. My brother and I are a third generation. When our grandfather started the business in 1895, there are 42,000 registered cigar manufacturers. Most of them are 1- and 2-man operations. The reason we know that is because Abraham Lincoln in 1863, the Union was going bankrupt fighting the Confederate Army. So it was his idea. He was the first president to do this, to put a tax on a commodity, a product that was combustible, and had to be used over and over again. So the tax. So he was, as you know, he's assassinated in 1865. That tax was passed. The first federal excise tax for all cigars was passed in 1868. It's 1 penny for every box of cigars. Back at that time, during and after the Civil War, most of the boxes were boxes of 100 or boxes of 200 cigars. So, as a manufacturer, you had to go to the post office, buy these stamps, either green or blue. You had to glue them underneath your box. And they had back then, they used to call them revenuers. These guys were looking for people stills, making whiskey illegally, not paying tax, and also for people. Cigars back then were sold mostly in like butcher shops. People were where they bought food, and also in bars, saloons, and that tax has never been taken off. Today, that 1 cent excise tax, which was on a box of 50. So to be clear, if it's a box of 200 cigars, it'd be 4 cents, 4 tax stamps. But that tax today, before Mr. Obama came in, it was 4.8 cents. Today, the tax is a little over 40 cents per cigar.
Wow.
And there's always pressure in Congress to keep raising it up. And one thing that Mr. Obama woke up a sleeping giant. We are all Americans, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. But now I'm going to compare Mr. Obama, or President Obama, to Admiral Yamamoto. After Pearl Harbor, it's all documented, it's on films and books. After the sneak attack on December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese sunk about half of the Pacific Fleet, and the Arizona went down. 3,000 people died terribly that day. And the lead aircraft carrier was Admiral Yamamoto. He was the brilliant Japanese admiral that came up with this idea, and he caught America by surprise. And they were drinking sake and all celebrating on the carrier, and he raised his hand in Japanese. He said, in Japanese, and I'll translate what he said. He said, "Quiet." He said, "I feel like we've woken a sleeping giant." Famous words. And to President Obama, we, as an industry, as a premium industry, we never took Washington. We never thought anything would ever happen in the industry. We had our heads in the sand, and because of President Obama, the first bill that he passed was the Family Tobacco Prevention Bill. It was to regulate products that were conceived as highly carcinogenic, cancer-causing, which were cigarettes, roll your own, and smokeless tobacco. And our friends at the FDA said, well, this must be a mandate. Let's just regulate everything.
Yeah, if it burns, it's included.
Exactly. And we spent, 11 years fighting this. And my brother and I and Drew, we've been up to Washington, became citizen lobbyists. We hired a Republican lobbying firm, K&L Gates. We hired Paul Danino. And when I say we, mean the Cigar Rights of America. We led the charge on this. It was only about 9 manufacturers that did this, that led the charge. And we were successful. An Obama-appointed judge named Judge Maida ruled in July of 2023. Sorry, it might have been 2022. Sorry, no, it was 2023.
Yeah,
he ruled. It was, yeah. He ruled the FDA was arbitrary and capricious. Now, what the heck does that mean? Basically, the FDA lied to the court, to lie to the federal court, because the FDA had hired all these American world-renowned scientists, toxologists, chemists, and they concluded that the average American cigar smoker smokes 1.7 cigars a month, and it would not affect mortality. And the CDC also was in part of that study. So that was, and this was FDA, this was their own study, and they lied to the federal court, and so we became deregulated. And of course, in the American system, the FDA, through the Department of Justice, has just come back, and they're trying to reverse that.
Oh, of course they are.
But we have science on our side.
Hey, you're not going to be able to argue with that. Facts are facts, and that's all that matters, right?
Exactly.
At least that's all that should matter.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't typically work out that way.
You know, also, I know you've been to our factory. It was 2 years ago. So Eric and I are the third generation. Eric and I and my dad bought all 14 of our relatives out Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1986. And we went from 14 people to just my father, my brother, and me. And so here we are, rocking along in 1986. Marvin Shanken brings all the Hollywood wonderful actors and actresses out of the closet, meaning that they all love cigars, but they didn't want to be known then. Mm-hmm. So he started putting actors like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Demi Moore. They would fight to be on the cover. And that was the first cigar boom in the last 30 years. It went from 92 to 1997. And the industry went from 100 million handmade cigars to over 500 million in 5 years. And then when the supply curve crossed, it semi-collapsed about 300 million, but it settled into triple the amount of cigars sold. So now I'm going to tell you about our family. The fourth generation comes in, Drew Newman. He had a vision to open our factory in Tampa, to have a massive restoration, a 10-year restoration. He wanted to put a hand cigar making factory on a 3rd floor where American labor is 8 times what it is in Nicaragua. And Eric said, Drew, we can do that. But if you want to spend your inheritance now, if you want to wait till your mother and I die. And Drew said, no, I want to do it now. And to Drew's credit, he had felt so strongly, I'm quoting him, that rightfully so, we're the last working cigar factory in the United States, that we have an obligation to keep the city of Tampa's tradition of hand cigar making alive. Because if we were not for sale, but if someone bought us, they would close our factory because it's 4 stories. It was built in 1910 as the largest cigar factory, but it's very inefficient. We have we have to take tobacco up and down 4 levels. Today our factory, the second largest factory in Nicaragua, we make about 105,000 cigars a day. We make Brickhouse, Perla de Mar, El Baton, Quorum, House Handmaids. It's all one story, and it's very efficient. But so Drew had this idea, and we what has happened to our factory, J.C. Newman. The factory is called El Reloj. It's named after the tower, the clock tower, which at the time in 1910, only wealthy people. There are no wristwatches like my very expensive Casio here. I buy on Amazon, but the only wealthy people, they used to have those pocket watches. So our clock tower, it told people when to wake up in the morning, when to go to work, when to go to bed, and so that's why we call the factory. It's called El Reloj. And so Drew had another idea to buy more property around our factory, and we bought a boarding house / hotel. It opened in 1910. It looks, for us old people, it looked like Gunsmoke. You had you remember Gunsmoke, Barb? The show? You remember Gunsmoke?
Oh,
you know, and Marshall Dillon.
Yep.
And so the place is beautiful. And Miss Kitty, yeah. So, and she would be tickling the ivories downstairs in the bar. It's a beautiful bar, and at this, it's called Sanchez and Haya. And Eric and I wanted to tear it down. We begged Drew, it's going to cost a fortune. And it's been vacant for 20 years. And upstairs, they had 20 hotel rooms, tiny rooms, and they had 2 bathrooms down the hall. And can you imagine that? So the first thing I said, well, if we do that, it had 3,000 bats, so we got to relocate 3,000 bats. So who do you call? So we found someone that was specialized in, and so the bats, we learned, farmers love bats because they save farmers billions of dollars because they eat mosquitoes every night. So we got the bats, we moved the bats, and we built 2 bat houses where right across the street from us is now called Cigar Workers Park, and it's in honor of the hundreds of thousands of hand cigar makers that came from Cuba, came from Spain, came from Italy, and started rolling cigars in 1885. And today we're still rolling cigars in our factory in Tampa. So we'd like to invite everybody to come down. Our next project, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to renovate that beautiful Sanchez and Haya. It's going to be a boutique hotel. There'll be a cafe, a cigar bar. We invite everyone to come down. And the last thing Drew's, I don't know what kind of cigar he's smoking, but he keeps coming up with his ideas. But cigar tobacco was first grown in North Florida, outside of Tallahassee, a place called Quincy, Florida, Gadsden County. And cigar tobacco was grown 10 years before the fall of the Alamo. The Alamo fell in 1836. Wow. Started growing tobacco in 1826. And a gentleman named John Virginia Smith came in. He brought seeds, started growing tobacco. And so there were a handful of old pre-Civil War tobacco barns, and we're going to get them, requiring them. We're going to bring the wood down, and we're going to reassemble these tobacco barns on our property across the street. Oh, wow. So where people can come, you can plant it, you can pick it, you can hang it up in the barn, take it down, and help us put it into the aging rooms. And we have hand cigar making classes every Thursday and Friday. And this is Drew's idea. We thought he was crazy. We now have tobacco tasting. And what we do, we take 24 different types of tobacco. We roll it very tightly in like a straw. And we have Cameroon. We've got Connecticut broadleaf. We've got Connecticut Havana seed. We have Ecuador tobacco, Ecuador Havana seed, and we allow people to come in and you smoke it and you put your comments. What do you taste? What kind of hints of oregano or spice or cedar or whatever? And it's been very successful. We also had 22 weddings in our factory. Oh, and Kevin, you and Barb should renew your vows. I know you got married 4 years ago.
Now that would be like outstanding to renew our vows in their factory. That would be what an outstanding. That would be unbelievable.
So we invite everybody to come. Many people maybe out west have never heard of the Bourbon Trail, but the Bourbon Trail is about 150 miles long. It's in Kentucky, and where all the great bourbons are made. And they compete with each other. It's an experience. You go in there and you watch you hear the stories. Most of these are older, 100-year-old companies, and you see how the bourbon is made, how they make why they use, the reason they use oak barrels, because someone discovered about 200 years ago that if you age the liquid that will turn into bourbon into oak barrels, it changes the color from clear like water to this beautiful rich brown color, and enhances the taste of the bourbon, just like when we age cigars in Spanish cedar. It enhances, it makes the cigars taste better. So and you go to the Bourbon Trail and you see all this. You take the tasting, you taste the different types of bourbon. So we're trying to do the same thing in Tampa, where you don't have to we have a factory in Nicaragua, as we told you, but you don't have to get a passport to come to Tampa, Florida.
Right. And you get the experience that, and I know a lot of people that are fans of cigars and are becoming aficionados, they really like the opportunity to see, how a cigar is made, the components of the cigar, why does a cigar taste the way it does, why the different leaves, and they add the component to it. So it makes it a lot of fun.
It is.
Okay, well, Bobby, thank you so much for the amazing history lesson, my friend. It is always a pleasure to get to spend some time with you. And
thank you, Kevin. Thank you for this opportunity. I say not only tell our story, but the story of the premium cigar industry. And we'll continue to have a very strong presence in Washington. And the people in the industry, the manufacturers, and I think God really loves our industry, because hundreds and hundreds of cigar tobacconists across America, they have fundraisers. They use cigars to raise money for various events, charitable events. There's never been a more group of generous people than cigar smokers, and cigar manufacturers. Thank you, Kevin.
Absolutely, thank you. And guys, definitely if you get to Tampa, you have to check out the J.C. Newman factory. I mean, it is so cool to be able to go into a combination of a museum and a working factory, see how these cigars are made. I mean, you can literally feel the history as soon as you walk in the front door. So again, guys, thanks for watching. Again, Kevin Acuff with SmokinTobacco.com at TPE 2024. Coverage brought to you by Drew Estate. Thank you and have a great evening.